This video looks at grasslands, meadows, and wildflowers. Grasslands are areas of land where the most common plant species are grasses. Today, over half of all the land in Ireland is grassland used for agriculture, and most of this is improved agricultural grassland. This is a type of habitat described in A Guide to Habitats in Ireland. A Guide to Habitats in Ireland is free to download from the Heritage Council, the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service. In the guide, grasslands are divided into two groups, improved grassland and semi-natural grassland. Pretty much all grassland in Ireland are the result of human activity, but semi-natural grasslands aren't as intensively managed. And this generally means they're richer in plant species and so richer in animal species too. So improved grassland is by far and away the most common grassland type in Ireland. It is of very little value for biodiversity, but for agricultural grassland, it's a very important part of our economy. Semi-natural grassland is much less common now. It is very important from a biodiversity point of view, and it is more likely to be found in less economically productive farmland. So what kinds of grassland can we find in and around the Ballincollig area? Well, to the south of Ballincollig, we can see there's a lot of agricultural grassland, and much of this is improved agricultural grassland. But in the urban or built-up areas of Ballincollig, there's quite a bit of grassland too. Let's zoom in a little bit and take a closer look at some of this. So this is a playing field, and this is another type of improved grassland, amenity grassland. It's called GA2 Amenity Grassland Improved in the Guide to Habitats. And again, improved grassland is very widespread, but of little biodiversity value. However, it is pretty good for playing sports on. And large open areas of grassland and most housing estates would be amenity grassland too. Like some types of improved agricultural grassland, the grass in these amenity grasslands is cut very often. Some amenity grasslands have chemical fertilizers added, while in others, the grass that's cut is left in place and rots down and acts like a fertilizer too. This makes really good conditions for grass, but not for other plants. This photo was taken in the springtime, but already the grass has been cut really short. If it hadn't been cut, it would probably be full of dandelions, which are really important as food for insects like bees coming out of hibernation. Now, as well as improved grassland, there is semi-natural grassland in Ballincollig too. And one of the most important areas of semi-natural grassland in Ballincollig is to be found in that part of the Lee Valley proposed natural heritage area that's inside the Ballincollig Regional Park. But what's so important about semi-natural grassland? Well, semi-natural grasslands act as a refuge or place to live for a whole range of invertebrate species, as well as bird and mammal species, as well as providing a suitable place to live for many rare and protected plant species. And many semi-natural grasslands have been lost all across Europe in the past 60 years. There are 6 types of grassland in Ireland that are protected under European law, and in 2019, this is how they were doing. So semi-natural grasslands are important because they're important for wildlife, and unfortunately because they're disappearing. Meadows are a type of grassland, and lowland hay meadows are a type of grassland that's protected under European law in Ireland. And these lowland meadows are included in the habitat type dry meadows and grassy verges in A Guide to Habitats in Ireland. These types of meadows are rare in Ireland now, but they can develop even in kinds of places that are found in urban areas. In the Ballincollig Regional Park, a number of areas of semi-natural grassland appear to be managed in much the same way that lowland hay meadows are managed. Lowland hay meadows are not a naturally occurring habitat type, they're a result of farming practices. In some areas around the world, grasslands are a natural habitat type, but in Ireland there are little or probably no naturally occurring grasslands. Up to about 10,000 years ago, Ireland was covered in snow and ice. By about 7,000 years ago, it was mainly woodland. There's evidence of farming in Ireland by about 6,000 years ago, and this could have included haymaking. But it was only 800 or 900 years ago that the use of hay as a winter feed for livestock became widespread in Ireland. Traditionally, hay would have been cut once, usually in mid to late July. This gave wildflowers a chance to grow, flower, and set seed. In the past 50 years, farmers began to cut hay as early as June, and silage became more popular, which meant grass could be cut as early as May. This meant many wildflower species couldn't grow and set seed, and this in turn had impacts for insects and other invertebrates, which meant less food for birds and mammals, and less places for some rare plant species to grow. Now, the foods produced by farming are an important part of our diet, and farming is an important part of our economy and our society. But modern farming techniques are one of the reasons that our semi-natural grasslands are in danger. So governments and farmers across the European Union are trying to come up with ways to fix this problem. The GLOS scheme is a nationwide farming scheme that aims to increase biodiversity on farms, while programs like the Burren program in parts of Clare and Galway aim to restore and maintain traditional, more biodiversity-friendly farming practices in less intensively farmed areas, while projects like the Bride project in parts of East Cork and West Waterford are looking at ways that even in the most intensively farmed areas, actions can be taken to improve biodiversity on farms. However, even with all of these efforts, because so many semi-natural grasslands have been lost over the past 60 years, we may never be able to replace all of them. That's why it's so important that everybody does as much as they can 20% to make spaces where are native grassland plants, meadows, grow in and other semi-natural habitats. There are over 800 native plant species on the island of Ireland, and of these, a third or more are associated with meadows and other grassland habitats. For some types of semi-natural meadows in Ireland, if they're in good condition, they can have as many as 20 plant species in just 1 square metre. Now, when we talk about native plants, what we mean are plants that arrived naturally. That is, they were not brought in by human activity after ice started to melt about 10,000 years ago, or that actually managed to hang on while most of Ireland was covered in ice. And this is important because some animal species arriving back at the same time would have had relationships with particular plants, such as the orange-tipped butterfly and the cuckoo flower and related plant species. Managing some areas of our parks and other amenity grassland areas as meadow would be a great benefit to native wild plants and wild animal species. Or just cutting grassland areas less often can also help wildlife and provide a splash of colour. Or if you've got a garden, why not try it there? Now, quite often in our gardens and in other places, we might want to plant non-native plant species. There are many non-native plant species that are good for pollinating insects and other insects and that aren't invasive. There's lots of information about these type of plants on the website of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, pollinators.ie.